Shall I turn the camera off or want me to keep it on?
Keep it This on. Meeting is being recorded.
Okay.
Brilliant. All right. I'd just like to start off just if you just give me a little bit of a background on your work in the music industry and also your work today.
Sure. Well, I was a club and radio DJ for 20 odd years. I got started in the early 90s. I started working on a radio station called Fox FM in Oxford. I was basically the T-boy and the dog's body. I used to do work around the newsroom. And from that, I got over to the programming side of things and got interested in the music aspect of radio. I've always been a music fan. I've been into music from the earliest age. I bought my first record when I was 5, and I was always into the pop charts and whatever was, popular at the time. And then in my teenage years, I sort of fine-tuned my tastes and got more into black dance music. So I got into hip-hop and early house music and soul and funk and stuff like that. So I got my break in the world of radio and actually started doing that before I did the clubs. And through the music work that I was doing at Fox FM, I got into club DJing, first of all in and around Oxford. And then I really tried to make a go of things in terms of a career. And with a lot of networking and hustling and hard work and a little bit of good luck, I managed to put myself on the map as a quite successful club DJ. So I played gigs up and down the UK. I was fortunate enough to get international gigs, and I played in 40 odd different countries. And I kept the radio thing going throughout that. I've worked on various different stations, never made it to the BBC, which turns out to be my greatest blessing, because I would never want to be a part of that institution now with what I know about it. And I became a music journalist as well during those years. I wrote for Blues and Soul magazine for a time and various other magazines. And things got to the stage where in around about 2007, 2008, after many, many years of doing all this, I was starting to question the true nature of this world and who runs things and why the world is unjust and why there's poverty and war and suffering everywhere. I really started to ask these big questions, and also what this life is on a spiritual level. What are we? What is this place? What is reality? All these big questions, and that sent me off down a path of research, which was very different to what I'd been doing up to that point. I got into the books of David Icke, and they were a real eye-opener to me. And that got me on to looking at other researchers' work, and I gradually reevaluated my entire worldview. And I came to comprehend that the world is not the way it's been presented to us all our lives, through the mainstream media, through things the government tells us, through academia, so-called education, that it's actually very, very different. There are different parties, different groups, different networks involved in running and controlling every aspect of human life. And of course, that applies to entertainment just as much as it applies to anything else. And so I wanted to understand better how this dynamic plays out in the corporate music industry that I'd been a part of. And that became my specialist area of research. And I've been doing that now for the past 12 years. I've put out 3 books on the subject in my Musical Truth series. I've done a whole load of videos, podcasts, interviews, live talks, and this is now my full-time job.
Great. Thanks for outlining that all. My first question was this kind of first path of your career and then the second path. And I was just wondering how your music taste changed from, after those years from 2007 and 8, if, whether, your new discoveries, affected your taste at all.
Absolutely. Well, I can't really stand to listen to any current modern stuff. And although that might make me sound like an old bastard to some, there would be an aspect of the generational thing whereby whatever music you grow up with and you have a nostalgic attachment to in your youth, you're always going to view that music affectionately and all those scenes and fads and trends and movements. And certainly that's been the case with me, because as far as I'm concerned, you can't beat the music that came out in the 80s and 90s. I mean, my dad would tell me, no, it's all about music from the 50s and 60s. So it is a generational thing. But definitely there are agendas at play now in terms of what's going into popular music. It's not good. There are production techniques going into the sound frequencies that are designed to put listeners in a state of unease and distress, even though they're not consciously aware that it's happening, because it's all done on an unseen level. It's the weaponization of sound. And also, there's been a deliberate dumbing down of lyrical content and just the melodic structure of songs now. They're not as complex as they used to be. The lyrics really don't have anything to say. There are no meaningful subjects being explored. And there's a satanic agenda as well. There's dark occult influences going into this music and going into the artists that put them out there and the artwork and the videos that accompany with it. There's symbolism going on. There's all kinds of signaling on a subconscious level that's being communicated to the listening audience. And although agendas have been running in the music industry since it first began, they've really been stepped up in, I would say, the past 10 years. And it's so obvious now. If you research these subjects, you can see evidence and you can see all the calling cards of these different things. So my music that I grew up with from the late 80s onwards was hip-hop, rap music in its golden years. So many connoisseurs of that genre will tell you that from roughly 1988 to about 1995 was the golden years of hip-hop. And I would definitely say that's the case. There was some incredible output in those times. The beats were amazing. The producers were on top of their game. The records just sounded great. They sounded great ringing off in the club or on a sound system in a park or even on the radio. And there were some really strong lyrical concepts getting conveyed. There was wordplay. There was tricky metaphors going into what the MCs were putting out there. And it was amazing. And running concurrently with that was also the golden age of dance music, house music. So that whole scene got going in the late 80s. It was kickstarted in the UK by what was known as the acid house scene, which gave way to the sort of rave circuit. And it was very early electronic dance music. And that paved the way for the absolute explosion in house and dance music and all these different splinter genres, which occurred as the 90s progressed. And you got into the super clubs era and the era of all these big open air festivals and such. So it was an incredible time, you know, the 90s. And it's not just a case of me harking back to my youth and nostalgic hankerings towards those days. It's clear the music was of a much better caliber. You didn't have many of the agendas that are now running going into these scenes. And unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, the corporate music industry now, in terms of the mainstream output, is pretty much dead. It's soulless, it's heartless. There's no creativity there. It's just templates that are being used. The record companies, the producers are just churning out tried and tested ways of putting together a song, and nothing meaningful or nothing empowering is being conveyed at all. There is still great music being made, but it's on an underground level. So you'll never hear this stuff on the radio. You'll never hear it when you walk into a club. You've got to hunt for it. But there's incredible truth and freedom music being made by consciously awakened, switched on artists to counter all the garbage that's going into the mainstream now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was just talking, bringing you up on the idea of the acid house scene. I was reading in your book about the introduction of LSD, drugs like that, and then also talking about when you were talking about hip hop and the golden era, how you also talk about artists now, Drake, The Weeknd, people like that, who are kind of like imposters. They shouldn't be put under this category of hip hop R&B because it's just not what it was in the late 80s, early 90s. I just wonder if you could just explain a bit more of that, about how how would you see them as imposters, how it's changed those genres. And
well, the controllers have really done a number on the so-called black urban music scene. So it's what used to be referred to as rap and hip hop and R&B, which in the 90s was very different to what's being put out under those names now. So the so-called music now that comes out under those labels bears no relation whatsoever to the original foundations of rap and hip hop and R&B. It's watered down, it's artificial, digitally produced, so much of it, so it's stripping the heart and soul out of the original recording. And in terms of many of these artists, when Ed Sheeran is arguably the number one pop artist in coming out of the UK, and when Drake for many years has arguably been the number one rapper, then something has gone desperately wrong with the music industry. I mean, both these guys, Drake is an actor, first of all. That's what he is. You know, before he became Drake, his name's Aubrey Graham, coming out of Toronto, Canada. And he was an actor. And it's clear to me that he's acting a role now. He's been given the role of number one so-called rapper on that scene because it's completely controlled. And those that control it want their own at the top of the game so that they can keep a lid on things, keep it controlled. They want their own kind leading these scenes. And then Ed Sheeran, his father has got connections to the United Nations and to Prince Charles, the royal family. So it becomes clear that it was no accident, or it wasn't left to random chance, that Ed Sheeran would become a highly popular musician. He was put in there. And this is what we have. We have a music industry, and it's exactly the same in the Hollywood film industry or television or any other aspect of entertainment. We have an industry where careers are facilitated. They're made to happen by those that control these things. So when you get these household A-list artists that everyone's heard of, they have not got there through hard work and good luck. They've been given those positions and they come at a price. You don't get to be that kind of influential, prominent figure without doing the bidding of those that gave you that career. So you're in their pocket for the rest of your days. And when you're called on to prop up some agenda or other, then you can never say no. And that's what we see with so many of these artists. They've got a lot of extracurricular activities. So they spend a lot of time not being a rapper or a singer or a guitarist or whatever they're supposed to be, but they spend a lot of time talking about various globalist social engineering agendas that are going on, such as recently propping up the COVID agenda and now pushing the Ukraine narrative. So you've got all these celebrities who should really just stick to what it is they're supposed to do, playing the guitar or singing or whatever, but they've got a whole lot to say about these other things. And it's because those forces, those networks that I spoke of earlier, which control the entertainment industry and specifically the music industry, are inherently connected to those forces, those groups, those networks that cause these world events to happen. None of it is random. None of it is by accident. When you have something like COVID, the Ukraine situation, the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, any of these things, they're all made to happen by the social engineers of this world. And everything is ultimately connected at the top of the pyramid of power.
Thanks for that. Yeah, so basically most of our course this year, because it's under a module called the music industry, has been talking about ideas of music and value. And a lot of the talk has been about people creating favorable public images, having authenticity, coming from, you know, the audiences, you know, such as Taylor Swift, someone who's technically come from the country music scene, someone who's seen as very, authentic, writes her own songs. And, you know, these images are created. And I think what's interesting is you talk about, you know, this kind of genealogy where they're chosen rather than they come from their own inherent value. I think it's a very interesting idea because everything we've been talking about in our course has all been about this inherent value, originality and stuff like that. I just wanted to quickly talk about Taylor Swift. I don't know how much you know about her, but one big thing, my girlfriend's a huge Taylor Swift fan, and in the last couple of years, it's all been coming out about how these big corporations have been, you know, buying and selling her music as if it's, you know, candy, basically. And, you know, how she came out in 2019 trying to re-record her own stuff and really speak out about how she's kind of been trapped in this kind of corporate shadow. And I just wonder if you thought that was an authentic coming out, or whether it was something to push her own image, get the loyalty of her fans being like, oh, she wants to own her own music. She really cares about what she does, or whether it's just a kind of inside job. Um, it's kind of a pre-made narrative, or yeah, something that's already kind of been worked out before it happens. Sorry if that was a bit of a long question.
So, I don't know a whole lot about Taylor Swift specifically. I know a lot about other artists that kind of sit alongside her in that sort of genre. So I've studied the likes of Britney Spears and Katy Perry and Miley Cyrus. And we've seen this narrative before that you speak of, where she's apparently trying to break free of this stranglehold that the industry has over her. And she's trying to gain back some independence and some autonomy as an artist. So we've seen this kind of thing coming from Lady Gaga. I mean, Lady Gaga is as connected as they come. She's a cousin of Madonna. She's also a cousin of Ellen DeGeneres, and she's a cousin of Celine Dion. And all of them are tied in to this very complicated bloodline, this genealogical family tree, which connects them into the likes of George Bush, Barack Obama, Abraham Lincoln, going way back, and so many others, Tom Hanks, so many other celebrities. So the idea that Lady Gaga can break free of the industry is laughable, really, when you do the research, because it's obvious she was born into it. And that role was given to her. It was actually stolen from another artist called Lena Morgana. Lady Gaga stole her image, and Lena Morgana turned up dead in very suspicious circumstances right at the point that Lady Gaga's career got going. But a few years ago, we had Gaga saying that she wanted to break free from the industry and she wanted to go her own way, and she was fed up with being told what to do and all this sort of thing. But it didn't really go too well for her, because from that day to this, she's still been appearing at all these shows, putting out ritualistic, dark occult symbolism, pushing agendas, putting certain things into the lyrics of her songs, wearing neat dresses and dressing up in this dark kind of garb and attire. And it's Satanism, unfortunately. Satanism is not what a lot of people think it is. It's not a worship of this entity called the devil. Satanism is a mindset and an ideology which is basically atheistic and nihilistic. And the industry has been pushing these satanic ideas through its artists for generations. Lady Gaga is a great example of that. So she's never going to be able to break free. I don't know if those kind of statements are sincere in terms of they really want to gain back some independence for themselves and stop the level of control that is held over them. But it's never going to happen for somebody of that ilk. We also had comments the other year, a few years ago now, from the artist known as Kesha. And she was talking about this song, Die Young, which was put out directly before the supposed massacre of school children at Sandy Hook Elementary School at the end of 2012. And this song was promptly withdrawn from circulation because it was deemed in poor taste, where she's talking about we're all going to die young when all these kids have apparently been shot. And so she then made some statements publicly about how she never wanted to sing that song in the first place. And she was forced to do it by her handlers. This is where we get into the concept of mind control subjects and their handlers, their controllers. That's a whole other subject area in itself, but it's absolutely relevant to the music industry and the way these artists are kept on a short leash. So you've got Kesha and Lady Gaga, and there have been many others talking about how they want to break free of the industry, but they're never going to be able to do it, because once you reach a certain level, once you cross a certain line, you're in it for the rest of your days. And it doesn't end well for many of these artists that do attempt to do that. I've got a story which I'm currently featuring in my speaking tour, my Musical Truth 3 Soundbite speaking tour, concerning three very prominent soul artists of the 1960s, James Brown, Otis Redding, and Sam Cooke. And these three guys were attempting to set up their own artist management and distribution company and take back control of their own music output from the majors that they were a part of. And obviously, word of this leaked out within the industry, and Sam Cooke and Otis Redding didn't last very long beyond that. Both of them died in very violent and very suspicious circumstances. James Brown stuck around for another 50 years, putting in service to the industry and becoming the hardest working man in show business, which was his nickname, until he turned up dead finally on Christmas Day of 2006 in some very suspicious circumstances. And then more recently, you've had three very prominent artists who also made public statements about the nature of the contract they had with their record companies and how they wanted to gain back some of their own autonomy as artists, get back their publishing rights, their royalties, control of their master tapes, for example. And these artists were Michael Jackson, George Michael, and Prince. And it didn't really turn out well for any of them. They all turned up dead in very suspicious circumstances in their 50s, sometime after going up against their record labels. So that serves as a little reminder of the fact that once you get to a certain level in the industry, there really is no way out. You're dancing to the industry's tune now. You're playing their game. So the best advice I can give to any artist is be very wary of when you reach that point and that offer comes for you to be stepped a few rungs up the ladder and for your career to be advanced. That's the point where you want to be very wary of the nature of the contract that you're entering into. It's far better to fly below the radar, stay below that threshold, and still retain some artistic creativity without selling your soul for fame and fortune, which unfortunately is what many of these artists do. Those that aren't born into it through some sort of family bloodline, the provision is there, the opportunity is there for them to sell their souls metaphorically and in some cases probably literally in exchange for these facilitated careers, arranged success.
Yeah, thanks for that. Talking about, I just wanted to move on to the idea. One big thing we've been talking about this term is this guy called Marcel Mauss, who's he's an economist, and he talks about this idea of gift giving, how you can never give something freely. There's always a kind of hint that you want something back. And I just kind of want to move on to the idea of politics here. And in your book, you talk about Donald Trump and three black artists, Kodak Black, Lil Wayne, and Michael Harris. And I just wanted to, talk about how would you say that the music industry is one of the most valuable assets for politics? How Donald Trump here is obviously, using the music industry to, as you were saying, diffuse allegations about his racism. But yeah, he's going to, sorry, I'm getting a bit confused there. So I'm just, I just wanted to talk about, politics and the music industry. And also Taylor Swift, in 2018, she promoted the Tennessee Democratic Senate and House of Representative candidates, which apparently inspired 103,000 people to vote. But up until that day, she'd never come out about politics at all. And it just seems very strange that in 2018, she, kind of launches forth in this political agenda. Are politics and music industry just always linked?
Well, absolutely, because everything is. Just going back to my earlier statement, the same forces control every aspect of our lives, ultimately. So the music industry, entertainment, Hollywood films, television, the world of professional sport is all ultimately controlled by the same forces that control banking, finance, politics, the world of medicine, the world of science, the world of academia, the world of the military, absolutely everything. There are occult secret societies that organize themselves into groups and networks, and they have control over all these different things. So entertainment is linked to the world of politics, and entertainment has been a very valuable asset to the controllers of this world since time immemorial, since the very beginnings of these industries, the very beginnings of Hollywood film and the very beginnings of the music industry. It's too good an opportunity for them to pass up, this chance to reach and influence the minds and the hearts and the souls of millions of people around the world. So that's why so much has been invested in movies, TV shows, music, in terms of getting out certain messages, in terms of bringing about certain ways of thinking, certain worldviews, certain mindsets in the part of the general public. So whenever there's a political agenda that needs a bit of a boost, these assets, the household name artists who are effectively puppets and stooges of the industry because they're told what to do and they don't have a choice, like I said. So when there's an agenda to be propped up, these characters are often called up and wheeled out for the job. So Barack Obama, for instance, recruited a whole bunch of rap and R&B artists, most notably Jay-Z and Beyonce, to endorse him. And there were a whole load of rappers when Obama first came on the scene in 2008 that were endorsing him in their songs. Donald Trump, when he first emerged with the 2016 election, didn't really have that many music artists behind him. It was pretty laughable, really, in terms of the support that he had. It was just this ragtag bunch of Z-listers. But more recently, as you mentioned, as I've detailed in the book, there are a load of rappers that have come out and endorsed him. And this was immediately running up to the 2020 US presidential election. The results of that election were rigged. It was stolen. It was not Joe Biden's win. That election should have gone to Donald Trump. That's not even an endorsement of Donald Trump. It's just me and so many other researchers looking at the evidence and being able to see that the results of that election were totally rigged. But it seems there was an attempt in the run-up to the 2020 US election to make Trump popular within certain demographics, and that's why these rappers were recruited to endorse him. And that's what I feel it is. This isn't coming from these artists themselves. It's not their own sentiments. Taylor Swift being an example. It's going to be a case of a phone call comes in and these artists are told, this is what you're doing, this is the message you need to put out. That's the way it goes. I mean, going way back to the mid-1980s, before you were born, I guess, there was this record by Band Aid, which came out in Christmas 1984. It was ostensibly a charity record that was supposed to be raising funds for famine relief in Ethiopia. And it was put together by Bob Geldof, the former singer with the Irish new wave band, the Boomtown Rats. Geldof is a highly connected character. He's way more than just some scruffy singer with a bloody new wave band. He's a very key player in so many of these globalist agendas. And it's clear now that that whole Band Aid project and the Live Aid concert that followed in 1985 was part of some of these agendas that go on. The United Nations Agenda 2030, notably, the New World Order Master Plan by any other name. And the Band Aid and Live Aid projects were very instrumental in that. And the artists that took part in that Band Aid record, so it was all the big prominent artists of the 1980s, were called on to sing a verse on this record. And if you watch the video, you see all the biggest names in the 1980s pop scene there. And so many of them have told the story that that phone call came in from Geldof. And he didn't say, would you like to be a part of this record? He told them they were doing it. He said, you're going to be in this studio on Sunday morning, you're singing this verse, be there. And a few of them made the comment that you don't say no to that kind of phone call. And so that was the case in the 1980s. That's going to be the case today. When that phone call comes in and these artists are told that they're needed for one of these extracurricular activities, then that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
Because they're owned.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, no, just to clarify, when I got a bit confused earlier, this is what I was trying to get at, that kind of idea of that, you know, there's always two sides to a transaction. There's always give and take. There's never just someone giving. You know, Donald Trump's, you know, giving these rappers their freedom to gain something for himself, and you know, is it always for these artists just fame and fortune? It's never anything more than that.
Well, just to pick up on your observation there quickly, there were two statements or comments that my dad always used to make to me when I was growing up. Very simple maxims. One is, if something seems too good to be true, it is. And the other is, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Yeah. So somebody buys you lunch, they're expecting something in return. So yes, it's absolutely give and take. So many of these artists are after the fame and the fortune, those that don't come from these important bloodline families. So there's definitely a provision made for those artists that come from more ordinary backgrounds and they do achieve a certain amount of success and prominence on their own terms or as a result of their own hard work. So they get to a certain level, and this gets observed by the spotters that work for the industry. They're on the lookout for these kind of acts that show some promise, where there's some obvious creativity there. And then these artists will get invited into the industry machine, and they'll get made the offer of fame and fortune and great wealth, but it comes at a price. Part of that price is propping up these agendas when they're called on to do so, but there's also darker, more occult aspects to it as well, as many of these artists discover to their peril when it's too late to do anything about it. So it wasn't made entirely clear to them when they signed the contract, but after they do, they discover the truth of what it is they've become a part of. There are many examples of this. We don't really have time to go into it today, but many of them are detailed in my books. So what motivates these artists to effectively sell their souls is the promise of all that fame and fortune and wealth. But you come to realize, certainly as a detached researcher looking on and observing all this stuff, that it can never be worth it. It's just never worth that price paid. You're actually better off never becoming famous or staying at a certain level below a certain threshold at the very least. And then those artists that get inducted into this as a result of their family bloodlines, their genealogy, they never really had a choice. They were just given these roles, and they're fulfilling agendas and just keeping these things going as a result of the family line that they're a part of. Every so often you get one that seems to show signs of wanting to break free from it, but for the most part, these new generations of these bloodlines just take on the role that's been given to them, that was their life destiny, and they fulfill it. And so the agendas just continue on from generation to generation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, another interesting example I enjoyed reading about was that of will.i.am and the World Economic Forum, and how everything, most of the things that I read in your book always seems to be linked back to Bill Gates and, you know, these higher powers. Something like that. It's, you know, you're suggesting will.i.am's a lifetime actor. Is this just another example of being called upon, or is this, you know, a certain time? Or, yeah, I just wonder why will.i.am?
Yeah, well, I wonder as well. He's become a key asset of the World Economic Forum. So he's hanging out with Klaus Schwab and attending all these meetings at Davos, and he's meeting all these high flyers and hobnobbing with all these world leaders and such. Is it really plausible that just some guy that came out of some neighborhood in LA, a poor neighborhood by all accounts, and became a rapper and became a producer, is it really plausible that he would work his way up to moving in those kinds of circles all by himself? Or can that kind of thing only happen with assistance when you're chosen for that role? So the phrase lifetime actor gets used a lot in my books, and I picked that up from Joe Atwill, the author and researcher who first coined the phrase. And it refers to somebody who has a public image as maybe a rapper or a Hollywood actor or a TV star or whatever it may be. But when you delve into aspects of their affiliations, their connections, their family background, it becomes clear that they were given these roles in order to be influential and affect large numbers of people. And will.i.am is a good example of that. So in the book, I'm charting his background and the fact that he came from these poor neighborhoods and he was raised by a single mother, but somehow he was able to attend these very prestigious schools, which were very expensive in terms of their fees. And somehow these were being paid for, but it's not being adequately explained how that happened. And that to me is a clear indicator that will.i.am had been tapped for success and for this influential role. And so when the time was deemed right, he was put into the World Economic Forum to help endorse their policies and make their ideas popular to a certain demographic that followed his music, his productions. And he's just one of so many examples of this. I mean, Bono of U2 is another great example. For years now, he's been meeting with Bill Gates and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and the Pope and George Soros and all these people. Why would he be doing that if he's just a rock singer from some band out of Dublin? You know, is it really realistic that some rock singer would get to move in those circles if that's all he was. But it's not all he is. He's a lifetime actor, and so many of these are. They want you to think of them as rock singers or rappers or producers, but in actual fact, they're influencers. And they're used to advance all these other agendas and to make them more easily swallowed by their fan base. People that listen to the kind of music that will.i.am makes, I can't imagine why anyone would want to do that, but there are these people out there, are likely to pay attention to anything that he says. So if he's endorsing Klaus Schwab's Great Reset policy at the World Economic Forum, then all these people that like will.i.am are liable to think, oh, well, that must be a good idea. I'll get behind that. That sounds good to me. It's social engineering 101, effectively, using these assets.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was reading up on it, and then I can't remember who said it, but I was doing some research into the idea of parasitic relationships and how, you know, to give value to everyday people, they cling on to their celebrities that they follow on Instagram, and, you know, they adopt their own views. And I suppose, yeah, as you were saying, I guess most of these guys' value is in not, you know, the image of will.i.am, you wouldn't say connects with the World Economic Forum. I wouldn't have thought he's the smartest guy or the most, you know, he's going to have much academic input into any of this, but it's more of an outreach value, isn't it, rather than anything else. Yeah. And yeah, this is the thing. I suppose there are many.
It's the same thing as celebrities being hired to do commercials, to do ads, just to sell products, because it's recognised that these people have huge sway. Just one word, one sentence from somebody with millions and millions of followers can increase a product's sales exponentially through the roof overnight. This has been recognised. So if that can happen with products that they want to sell, it can also happen with ideas and concepts and mindsets, attitudes that they want to sell. So they're used for that as well.
Do you mind if, and just going on to the idea of Bono as well, and connecting it to the streaming services and U2. One thing that I could never have got my head around is this, you know, that one day where U2's new album just popped up on everyone's phones. Are you aware of this? And everyone, you know, there was so much chat about, you know, dislike for it, but, you know, it just happened. We had absolutely no control over it. I was just wondering if you had anything more to say over that, because I've just always been perplexed by it.
Just that it's proof positive that U2 are assets of the establishment. Otherwise, their album wouldn't get promoted that way. You know, do you think it's the case that any old band could get their album streamed or put out there by, what was it, Apple, iTunes? Most people I know that were unfortunate enough to get the album just deleted it straight away. I don't know of anyone that kept it. Nobody asked for it. As you say, it just popped up. So it's just an indicator that this band is controlled, and they wanted their album put out there as widely as possible. I've not listened to it, so I don't know what messages were in the songs, but there was bound to be some sort of conditioning that was going on through the lyrics, and that would be why the album was put out there so widely.
Yeah, thank you. Just my last question, if that's okay. I was listening to the podcast you did on Conspiranormal, and I'm just going to go back to your earlier life as a DJ, and I was wondering, you say you talk of the DJing duties and being a part of the industry machine, doing everything that was expected of you as a DJ, promoting records, feeding back information to record companies and promo companies, and I was just wondering, what does this feeding back of information entail? Is it, does it have darker connotations to it, or is it just a pretty normal part of the job?
Not really. It's pretty simplistic, or it was back in the day. You know, going back to the 90s when I got started as a DJ, what would happen was you would get sent vinyl records. This was still in the days where you would actually get a physical copy of a record on a 12-inch single that would arrive in the post. And with it, you get a reaction sheet. And you were expected to stay on that mailing list. So you get free records from the record companies. But again, there's no such thing as a free lunch. You have to provide some feedback. And if you don't fill in these reaction sheets and send them off regularly, you'll get deleted from the list. So you're expected to play the records out at a few gigs, look what the audience response is. Did it go down well? Did a certain mix work better than another? Did it work with certain crowds better than others? And then fill in that kind of information on the reaction sheet and put it in the post. That's how long ago it was, put it in an envelope, stick a stamp on it and put it in a post box. And so the record companies and these promo companies were just merely looking to see which of their records was the most popular and what kinds of crowds it worked with and that sort of thing. So it was all fairly innocent stuff.
Yeah. Just one more question, because I think it's quite interesting for me. Is when you were talking about touring these 40 different countries, was your when you played your songs, did you play songs that had value to you, or did you aim to be a bit of a crowd pleaser, play what was hip, or was it, as you were saying, you had to play certain records?
Yeah, well, for the most part, I was playing floor fillers. So when I was touring those different countries, I was mainly playing R&B, hip hop, reggae, what was termed urban music back then. And so I would play a lot of floor fillers. These would be tracks that I knew would get a great reaction wherever I played them. It might be South Africa, it might be Australia, it might be the Czech Republic. You know that there's certain tunes you can drop and they're going to ignite the crowd. And every DJ wants to play those kinds of tunes because you want a packed, lively dance floor in front of you. I would try and play the odd tune that I liked personally, that I wanted to break, that I would like to see become a success. But you can't play too many of those if you want to keep the dance floor bubbling. And looking back now at the sort of stuff I used to play in the 90s and going into the early noughties, I can see clearly how it was agenda music. I can see how it was pushing certain ideas and certain trends and movements and fads and mindsets. I had no idea of any of this stuff at the time. Back in those days, my life just consisted of gigs, parties, tunes. That's all I could think about. And looking back now, it horrifies me to realize that I was assisting in pushing certain ideas, particularly when it comes to rap and hip hop. I was playing a lot of records with really negative lyrics in that were promoting violence and misogyny and promiscuous sex and this sort of thing. And I would not want to play those records now with the sort of worldview and mindset and spiritual state of consciousness that I have. But I didn't have any of this stuff back then. And I can see clearly now how these agendas were getting pushed. And looking at what was happening in the 90s, that stuff is very innocent compared to the agendas that are being pushed now and the ideas that are going into modern contemporary stuff. But that's the way it was back then. I couldn't see it. And none of those people that were out at these parties and having a great time and enjoying these tunes could see it either. But that's how the subliminal, slow drip effect of these things works on an unseen level.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. Well, you've gone above and beyond on all my questions. I've really had a lot of fun. And maybe if you have time in the future, we can actually do an interview where we can actually properly speak out about our views, because I've got a lot of anger and frustration to let out over the last few years.
Yeah, I can see that you've held back on your questioning.
Yeah, and sorry for the certain mumbling questions sometimes. First time doing an interview, so I not very eloquent, but yeah.
No worries. You were very good for a first interview. And I know I went to some controversial subject areas there. I could have gone a lot further, I tell you. I mean, you've seen my books, you've seen the sort of stuff that I get into. So I've tried to keep it as easily digestible as possible for a sort of mainstream audience. But yeah, I mean, we could have gone a lot deeper.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And also, you've recorded it on your side, have you?
No, I haven't, because I don't have recording permissions. Would you be able to send me a copy of the recording just for my own use?
Yeah, exactly. That's absolutely fine with me if you want to, use it. So go ahead. I'll send it to you after.
I guess you wouldn't want it put out. You wouldn't want it put out on public platforms. It would just be for my own use, right?
I'm actually I'm quite easy, to be honest. Whatever,
Okay,
I'm happy whatever you want to do with it. Yeah,
sure. Okay, well, if you send me the recording when you can, and then I'll do what I can with it.
brilliant.
I hope it's been helpful anyway.
Yeah, it really has done. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right,
All right,
best of luck with it all.
thank you very much. All right, have a good day.
All right, cheers, mate. Okay,
Bye bye.
cheers, bye.